The ballroom glittered like a jewel box, every surface polished to a mirror's sheen. Crystal chandeliers spilled golden light over tuxedos and evening gowns, while the low hum of violins filled the air with a practiced elegance. This was the Westchester Grand, the kind of venue where million-dollar contracts were toasted with vintage champagne and names were traded like currency. At the far end of the room, beneath a towering arch of white roses, Olivia Carter entered quietly, her daughter Maya at her side. Olivia wore black silk that moved like water when she walked, every inch of her posture speaking of authority. She wasn't just another guest. She was the CEO of Carter Innovations, a multinational technology firm whose net worth had crossed into the billions. But tonight wasn't just about business. Tonight was about legacy. Maya, only 19, carried herself with the kind of careful grace young women learn when they grow up under a microscope. Her curls framed her face, and a soft gold dress shimmered against her skin. She clutched a small clutch bag as though it were armor, her eyes scanning the room not for beauty but for judgment. Because judgment always came. And it came swiftly. Near the champagne fountain stood the Rothwells, one of America's oldest billionaire families, steel barons turned financiers. Their name was etched into buildings across the country. They were Olivia's potential partners in a $750 million merger that would expand Carter Innovations into European markets. But as Maya and Olivia passed, the youngest Rothwell son, barely older than Maya, let out a short laugh. He leaned toward his sister, words spilling in a careless murmur that wasn't nearly quiet enough. "Look at her. Doesn't even belong here." The sister smirked, her diamonds catching the chandelier light. "Charity case?" she replied. Maya stiffened. Her hand tightened on her clutch, nails pressing crescents into the leather. Olivia's eyes flicked sideways, just enough to see the exchange. She did not stop walking. She did not turn her head. But something subtle shifted in the air around her, a ripple no one else noticed. Because in that moment, beneath the gilded ceilings of the Westchester Grand, the Rothwells had made a mistake they could never undo. Seconds later, the first thread of their $750 million deal began to unravel. The laughter lingered like smoke. Maya didn't look back, though her chest tightened with the familiar sting of humiliation. She had grown up in boardrooms and country clubs where her mother was respected publicly but often doubted privately. She knew the tone of mockery, the kind people dressed up with pearls and tuxedos, but that still cut to the bone. Her mother's hand brushed hers lightly. A signal, do not react. Not here, not yet. Olivia Carter had built Carter Innovations from a modest tech consultancy in Atlanta into a global powerhouse. She had stared down venture capitalists who thought her gender was weakness, competitors who assumed her skin color made her less formidable, and regulators who tried to squeeze her into corners. Every time she had walked away stronger. Tonight's event, this gala hosted by the Rothwells, was meant to seal the kind of deal that cemented dynasties. The Rothwells had influence in European financial circles, the sort of entrenched generational wealth that opened doors Olivia had fought her entire career to even touch. Their partnership would mean access to new markets, government contracts, and nearly $1 billion worth of growth. But Olivia had not forgotten one truth her grandmother had told her long ago. Money buys a seat at the table, but respect decides whether you stay there. The ballroom, the Westchester Grand, was a temple of extravagance. The ballroom's arched ceilings glittered with crystal chandeliers, and gold-trimmed balconies curved like ornate crowns above the dance floor. Tables draped in ivory linen held arrangements of orchids and hydrangeas tall enough to obscure half the guests. Waiters moved silently, balancing trays of champagne flutes filled with sparkling gold liquid. Near the center of the room, a string quartet played with mechanical precision. But beneath the polished surface, Olivia felt the familiar currents of power and prejudice, subtle and sharp. She saw how people measured one another with glances, the cut of a dress, the brand of a watch, the lineage of a last name. Maya noticed it too, though in a different way. Where her mother's gaze was analytical, Maya's was defensive. She was still young, still forming armor against the constant microaggressions. Olivia had taught her not to fold under them. But she knew how much they still stung her daughter. The Rothwells. On the other side of the room, the Rothwell family gathered like royalty at court. Edward Rothwell, the patriarch, was a man with silver hair combed immaculately back, his posture stiff with the arrogance of a dynasty untouched for generations. Beside him, his wife, Margaret, wore emeralds that nearly matched the green of her eyes, her smile polished and cold. Their eldest son, Richard, had already taken over much of the family's financial empire. He was in his mid-30s, sharp-suited, with a confidence that bordered on cruelty. The younger siblings, Catherine and Andrew, were the ones who had whispered about Maya. Their words had been careless, but Olivia knew carelessness was often where the deepest truths slipped out. They didn't see Maya as someone who belonged in this world, and by extension, they didn't see Olivia as someone worthy of partnership. Olivia's memories. For a moment, Olivia's mind drifted to a different ballroom, years earlier, when she had been an intern at a major tech firm. She had been the only black woman in the room, standing in the corner while senior executives made jokes that slid like knives across her skin. She had smiled politely, held her head high, and taken notes. That night she had promised herself, "One day I will own the table they tried to keep me from." Tonight that promise was alive in the chandeliers above her. But promises were fragile things. The mockery deepens. As the night wore on, small slights piled like bricks. Catherine Rothwell commented loudly on Maya's hair when she thought no one was listening. Andrew joked about scholarships when Maya mentioned she was studying at Stanford. Guests around them chuckled softly, eager to stay in the Rothwells' good graces. Maya's jaw tightened, but she kept silent. Olivia noticed everything. She always did. But when dessert was served, delicate towers of spun sugar and chocolate, the true insult came. Catherine, her diamond necklace catching the light, leaned across the table and said with mock sweetness, "Maya, darling, you're so lucky. Most girls in your circumstances don't get to wear gowns like that, or attend galas like this." The table chuckled. Maya froze, her fork trembling in her hand. Olivia's eyes locked on Catherine's. The room seemed to tilt. Olivia smiled politely, though her gaze was sharp as steel. "Circumstances?" she asked softly. Catherine blinked, caught for a moment, but Richard Rothwell laughed. "She means you've given Maya quite the step up, Olivia. Not everyone gets to start at the top, you know." The words dripped with condescension. The laughter spread like wildfire around the table. And Olivia understood then. This was not just mockery of her daughter. This was mockery of her. The deal on the line. The irony was sharp. Only an hour earlier, she had stood with Edward Rothwell discussing the final terms of the merger. Lawyers had spent months crafting the deal, poring over every clause and figure. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of unity, but unity could not exist where contempt lived. Olivia excused herself from the table. Maya followed, her hands shaking slightly. They moved to the edge of the ballroom where the music softened and the air was cooler. "Mom," Maya whispered, "it's fine. I can handle it." Olivia turned to her, brushing a curl from her daughter's face. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned. "No, Maya, it is not fine. Not tonight. Not ever." She looked back toward the Rothwells' table, the laughter still rising above the music. And in her chest, a decision crystallized. Because she hadn't built Carter Innovations to beg for respect. She hadn't raised her daughter to sit silent in the face of arrogance. The Rothwells thought $750 million gave them the upper hand, but they were about to learn what true power looked like. The violins played on, their strings vibrating with precision, but to Olivia, the music had soured. Each note felt hollow against the weight of the laughter still echoing in her mind. She stood at the edge of the ballroom, Maya by her side, the chandelier's golden light washing across her face like a spotlight. This was not the first time someone had mocked her daughter, nor would it be the last. But tonight, in this room of mirrors and marble, it mattered more than ever. Because tonight wasn't just about family pride. It was about the Carter legacy. Olivia's poise. "Breathe," Olivia whispered, glancing at Maya. "I am," Maya replied, though her voice trembled slightly. "Mom, if you walk away from this deal because of me..." Olivia shook her head. "Because of them, not you. Never you." She placed a steadying hand on her daughter's shoulder. In that small gesture, Olivia communicated what she had always believed. Maya was her pride, not her weakness. From across the ballroom, Olivia saw Richard Rothwell watching her. He smirked, lifting his champagne flute in mock salute. His arrogance was breathtaking, so confident that Olivia's place at the table depended on their approval. Flashback, building Carter innovations. Her mind flickered back 25 years. A cramped apartment in Atlanta, the whir of a borrowed desktop computer, and late nights fueled by instant coffee. She had pitched her first software platform to skeptical executives, been laughed out of boardrooms, denied loans, ignored in meetings. She had worked twice as hard for half the recognition, driven by the quiet rage of exclusion. Now Carter Innovations was valued at $2 billion. Her company employed over 10,000 people across 3 continents. She had stared down titans, disrupted industries, and built an empire that would outlast her. And yet here she was, still being asked to prove herself, still watching her daughter be diminished in public. The fury that curled in her stomach was old, familiar, and sharper than ever. The Rothwells' confidence. Back at their table, the Rothwells laughed easily with other guests. Edward Rothwell gestured grandly, his words punctuated by the kind of self-assured chuckles only old money could perfect. Catherine leaned close to whisper to a neighboring heiress, both of them giggling like schoolgirls. Andrew scrolled through his phone under the table, bored, disinterested. They acted like the deal was already sealed, like Olivia was already theirs. But arrogance blinds. And arrogance, Olivia knew, always comes with a price. Maya's breaking point, Maya shifted uneasily. Why do they hate us so much? We've done nothing to them. Olivia turned to her, her expression softening. They don't hate us. They fear us. That fear wears the mask of mockery because it's easier to laugh than to admit they feel threatened. Maya frowned, tears brimming though she fought them back. I don't want to be a reason you lose this deal. Olivia cupped her daughter's cheek. You are the reason I would walk away from it and never look back. Some things cannot be bought. The Whisper Campaign. As the evening continued, Olivia noticed subtle shifts. Guests whispered more openly, their glances toward her sharper. Catherine had let something slip about new money never lasting, and soon that sentiment echoed from table to table. Olivia heard fragments as she moved through the room. Brilliant, but too ambitious. Not their kind of family. She'll sell and then fade. The Rothwells had planted seeds of doubt, and the ballroom was fertile ground. But what they didn't realize was that Olivia was listening. Every word, every smirk, every cutting remark disguised as banter. She collected them like evidence in a trial. Edward's toast later, Edward Rothwell stood to deliver a toast. His voice carried with the authority of wealth older than the chandelier above them. To partnerships, he said, lifting his glass. To legacy. And to welcoming new friends into our circle. The crowd applauded politely. Olivia raised her glass, but her smile was razor-thin. Edward's gaze landed on her. It takes more than money to join families like ours. It takes character, culture, a sense of tradition. The implication was sharp as a blade. Laughter rippled subtly around the room. Olivia's fingers tightened around the stem of her glass until she thought it might shatter. Maya lowered her eyes, cheeks burning. The investor's warning. Not everyone in the room was blind. Jonathan Marks, one of the European investors Olivia had courted for months, leaned close to her afterward. You don't need them, Olivia, he whispered. His British accent was hushed but firm. Carter Innovation stands on its own. Don't let them belittle you. Olivia studied him carefully. Marks was powerful, yes, but aligning with him alone wouldn't secure the breadth of the Rothwells' influence. Still, his words were a reminder. Options always existed, and sometimes the bravest option was the one everyone else thought unthinkable, the dance. Toward the end of the evening, as champagne dulled the sharper edges of conversation, Richard approached Olivia with a smirk. May I have this dance? He asked smoothly, extending a hand. Olivia considered him. Declining would cause a scene. Accepting would trap her in a performance she didn't want to give. But her daughter was watching. So were the investors. She took his hand. On the dance floor, Richard leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. You've built something remarkable, Olivia. But let's not pretend. Without us, your company's growth will stall. This merger is your ticket, and we... He spun her effortlessly. We decide whether you stay in the game. Olivia smiled, her teeth white and sharp. Funny. I thought innovation decided who stays in the game. Richard chuckled. Innovation fades. Legacy lasts. She met his gaze squarely. Legacy is built. And tonight, Richard, you've shown me exactly what yours is worth. His smirk faltered just for a second. The breaking point. When the music ended, Olivia returned to Maya's side. Her daughter's eyes were wide, questioning. Olivia squeezed her hand. The decision had been made. She would not beg for partnership. She would not trade her daughter's dignity for access. The Rothwells thought they had mocked her into submission, but they had in fact freed her. The string quartet eased into its final set, a waltz that floated above the chatter. Guests milled between tables, champagne glasses clinking like bells. The ballroom had settled into a rhythm of wealth and ease, yet Olivia felt the weight of decision pressing into her ribs like a stone. Maya stood beside her, silent, her eyes darting between the Rothwells and her mother. She could feel it too, the storm building. Olivia smoothed the silk of her gown and stepped toward the center of the room. Conversations tapered as she moved like ripples pulling back before a wave. By the time she reached the Rothwells' table, silence had spread across the ballroom. The confrontation. Edward Rothwell looked up, mildly surprised but still smirking with the confidence of a man who thought he held all the cards. "Olivia," he said, rising halfway from his chair, "join us." "We were just discussing the next phase of the partnership." Olivia raised a hand. The gesture was small, elegant, but it cut him off more effectively than a shout. "Before we talk about partnership," she said, her voice clear enough to carry across the room, "we should talk about respect." A hush fell. Forks stilled, champagne flutes froze midair. Maya's breath caught. Olivia's gaze swept the table, landing first on Catherine. "You mocked my daughter tonight. You implied she does not belong here." Catherine's cheeks flushed, but her smirk didn't falter. "I'm sure you misunderstood." "No," Olivia said sharply, her tone silencing her. "I didn't." She turned to Richard. "And you implied my company is only as strong as your family's approval." Richard leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, smirk curling. "That's not an implication." "That's fact." Olivia held his gaze. "Fact? Let me share a fact of my own. Carter Innovations was valued this quarter at $2 billion. We are debt-free, profitable, and growing at a rate your grandfather's steel mills never dreamed of. Another fact, I built it from nothing. Without inheritance. Without your name. Without your approval." Murmurs rippled through the room. Several investors leaned forward, their interest piqued. "And here's the final fact," Olivia continued, her voice rising like a tide. "I don't need this merger. I considered it because I believed in building bridges. But tonight your arrogance has burned that bridge to ash. The collapse." Edward's face darkened. "Be careful, Olivia. Walking away from this table would be a mistake you cannot undo." Olivia smiled, sharp as glass. "The mistake was yours. You mocked my daughter. And in mocking her, you revealed the truth of how you see me. No amount of contracts or signatures can undo that truth, which means this deal is dead." She straightened, her presence radiating through the silence. Effective immediately, Carter Innovations withdraws from all negotiations with the Rothwell family. Gasps burst around the room. A champagne flute shattered somewhere in the back. Investors exchanged stunned glances. Richard rose to his feet, fury replacing his smirk. "You're throwing away $750 million because of a joke?" Olivia turned slowly, her voice low but piercing. "No, I'm walking away because integrity is worth more than money. And because my daughter's dignity is priceless." The public witness. All eyes shifted to Maya. She stood tall now, no longer shrinking. Her chin lifted, her gold dress catching the chandelier's glow like armor. For the first time all night, she didn't feel small. She felt seen. A murmur rose among the guests, some shocked, some admiring, some already recalculating the balance of power in their heads. Jonathan Marks, the British investor, clapped once, firmly. The sound echoed and slowly others joined, polite then enthusiastic. The Rothwells sat in silence, their faces stiff with humiliation. The final word. Olivia looked back at Edward, her expression calm. "Partnerships require respect. Without it, there is nothing to build on but sand. I will not build on sand." With that, she turned, her daughter at her side, and began walking toward the exit. As they passed through the double doors of the ballroom, Maya whispered, "Mom, you just killed a $750 million deal." Olivia squeezed her hand. "No, Maya, I just protected something worth more." The night air outside the Westchester Grand was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain. Olivia and Maya stepped onto the stone steps, their heels clicking softly against marble. Behind them, the muffled chaos of the ballroom grew louder. Guests whispering, investors recalculating, the Rothwells scrambling to salvage dignity from the wreckage. Maya's hand was still in her mother's. "You think they'll ever forgive you?" she asked quietly. Olivia glanced at her daughter, a small smile tugging her lips. "Forgiveness is irrelevant. Respect is what matters, and they will never forget what happened tonight." Maya exhaled, her shoulders finally relaxing. "I've never seen you like that." "You'll see it again," Olivia replied. "Because this fight isn't over. It never is." The fallout begins by morning. The story had spread far beyond the ballroom. Someone had live-tweeted the confrontation, and soon headlines began to appear. Black CEO walks away from $750 million deal after family mocks daughter. Carter Innovations rejects Rothwell partnership in dramatic gala showdown. Dignity over dollars. Olivia Carter sends powerful message. On business news channels, analysts debated the fallout. Some called Olivia reckless, saying she had let pride destroy an opportunity. Others praised her courage, noting that her moral stance had strengthened her brand's identity. The stock market spoke louder than anyone else. Carter Innovations shares surged 5% by midday, investors rallying behind a leader who had demonstrated conviction. Meanwhile, Rothwell Industries slipped 3%, their image tarnished by the whispers of arrogance and racism that now clung to their name. Maya's transformation. At Stanford, where Maya returned a week later, the whispers were different. Instead of the pitying tone she had endured before, she now walked through campus hearing her peers say, "Did you see her mom in the news?" She's the daughter of Olivia Carter, the one who walked away. She didn't flinch. She stood there the whole time. For the first time, Maya felt her name was not a shadow under her mother's, but a reflection of strength. She called Olivia one evening, her voice brimming with quiet confidence. "Mom, I think I finally understand. Dignity isn't just about how the world treats you, it's about what you refuse to accept." Olivia's heart swelled. "That's it, Maya, exactly that." The Rothwells decline. Behind the walls of their estate, the Rothwells seethed. Edward fumed about betrayal. Richard railed against oversensitivity. Catherine sulked, her once charmed social circle now tainted by whispers of disgrace. But in the world of high finance, perception is currency. Deals they had been courting faltered. Invitations to speak at conferences evaporated. And when regulators began investigating one of their European ventures, there were no allies left to shield them. The family that had laughed so freely at Maya Carter found themselves isolated, mocked in private circles as the dynasty that had collapsed under its own arrogance. Olivia's new path. Olivia didn't gloat. She had no time for that. Instead, she turned her attention to new opportunities. Within months, Jonathan Marks introduced her to other investors, leaders who respected her values as much as her vision. A partnership was born, not worth $750 million, but $1, $2 billion, and this time the foundation was trust. At the signing ceremony in London, Olivia spoke softly but firmly. "Wealth without respect is sand. It shifts, it crumbles. But when you build on dignity, it lasts. That is what Carter Innovations will always stand for." Applause thundered, cameras flashed, and Maya, standing proudly in the front row, knew she was watching history. Not just her mother's, but her own. Final reflection. One evening, long after the headlines had faded, Olivia sat on the balcony of her penthouse, the city glittering below like a sea of stars. Maya joined her, settling into the chair beside her with a cup of tea. They sat in silence for a while, the hum of the city rising up around them. Finally, Maya spoke. "Do you ever regret it?" "Walking away?" Olivia shook her head. "Not for a second. Money comes and goes. Respect is forever. And one day when you're in my seat, I want you to remember You never trade your dignity. Not for $1 billion. Not for the whole world. Maya smiled, eyes shining. I will. Olivia reached over, squeezing her daughter's hand, just as she had in the ballroom. That night, she hadn't just walked away from a deal. She had built something far greater. A legacy that could never be mocked away.